Commuting in Chicago sucks. There are 2-hour-long traffic jams, ghost buses that aren't spooky at all, just annoying. A train actually derailed last week and nobody even knows or cares or bats an eye because commuting in Chicago sucks. Except for me. I live 1 mile away from my work. It is a 20-minute walk. 20 minutes from door to desk. It is perfect. It is the perfect length for music or a podcast. It is the perfect distance for me to get my 10,000 steps and make my Apple Watch think that I'm working out. But this perfect amount of time, this perfect distance from home to work wasn't always the case for me. Before I lived here, before I got my job, I was an actor. I worked all over the country and I absolutely loved it, but I never felt at home while I was traveling. And I never got to perform in Chicago. And my whole life, I wanted to be an actor in Chicago. I wanted to feel at home in Chicago, but I couldn't wait for fate to bring me to Chicago. I needed to commit to a life here. I needed to come home. And now I am from Chicago land. Okay, I'm not actually from the city. You know how the red line stops at 95th Street? My hometown is 90 blocks south of that. It is so far south that people have asked me if I live on a farm. But I am from a small town called Homewood, and it's still basically Chicago. It's as Chicago as Skokie is Chicago, or Naperville is Chicago, or Gary, Indiana is Chicago. And so I moved back to my parents' house to get my career started back home, and I was excited to finally be this actor in Chicago. And moving back with my parents, it was just going to be temporary, and so I moved back with them in the beginning of March 2020. And things didn't go according to plan. And I was trapped in my hometown. And I did everything everybody else did at that time. I watched a lot of mindless TV. I doom scrolled my phone constantly. I did push-ups for 1 week. But most importantly, I downloaded all of the dating apps. And I mean all of them. Tinder, Bumble, Hinge. I even tried Facebook dating for a little while, which was mainly sad and a little scary. But truly, all of these apps were sad and a little scary because I was in my hometown. I was in the suburbs. And all of these apps are based on your location. And so I was swiping between women I went to high school with that stayed in my hometown, women who moved to the suburbs with kids and failed marriages, or women from Indiana. It was like a wasteland. And so I decided to expand my horizons, literally by expanding my search area. So I changed my search area to include Chicago. But to do that, I had to expand it by 35 miles. And now whenever I open the apps, there were so many more women, always more women to swipe through. And it made my options feel endless, but it also made the prospect of finding someone feel hopeless. I couldn't find anyone that was interested or interesting. I did meet some people on the apps. There were a number of weird COVID dates and a lot of boring walks and a lot of air hugs when the date wrapped up. I did meet a stylist that gave me a haircut while everything was closed. And there was one girl that gave me a bottle of champagne when the date ended, but never called me again. And I did go out with an old friend. And when I leaned in to kiss her, she turned her head away. While I worked out all these weird dating practices, my life kept moving forward. I moved to the city, I found a job, and I went to work every day. But every day on my lunch break, I was back on the apps. I was checking all of them, swiping left, swiping right, left, right, left, right, left, right, right. And while it feels like you can find anyone on these apps, it is impossible to find the right one on these apps. There are plenty of fish in the sea, but swiping through these apps, it felt like trying to find one fish while looking at the Earth from outer space. And part of that reason was because my search area was still 35 miles wide. And so I shortened that distance, and I also shortened the distance because when I moved to the city, I started to realize that I don't want to drive 35 miles for an awkward first date because commuting in Chicago sucks. So I shortened that distance to 1 mile. And on that lunch break, 1 mile away, I connected with Laure, a French transplant with an English bulldog that chose to make Chicago her home. And we have been together for 2.5 years now, even though I showed up on the first date dressed like the food critic from Ratatouille. I moved in with her in May, and now I enjoy a life with her and the perfect commute. Thank you.